The 9th-ranked Miami Hurricanes win 42-7 over Stanford, improved to 6-1 on the season, 2-1 in the ACC. They bounced back from that loss to Louisville last week. Good to see, certainly. I received some great insight from another reporter after the game. He told me he wanted to make sure I pass this along to everybody that Miami played better in the second half than they did in the first. Obviously they did, and that's where this game was won. 7-7 at halftime. Miami outscored Stanford 35-0 after halftime. Does a really good job there in the second half, getting to their run game and really sticking with it. You know, last week and really the last 2 weeks, not getting over 100 yards in the run game. Last week it was grounded, certainly it was. And then they go for 199 tonight. Mark Fletcher, 106 yards on the day, 23 carries, and then a career-high 3 touchdowns. All short touchdown runs, but really imposed his will. Offensive line deserves credit in this one, as Miami got to stick with its running game. And that's what this team is. And that's where I want to start kind of my just general observations of this game. Certainly I was expecting a blowout in this one, even though Miami had not put up a lot of points. I thought they could put up points against Stanford, and they did. And look, Miami has a team that really wants to just stick with this power running game up the middle. This is what it looks like when Miami wants to continue to run the ball. And Mark Fletcher, his running style works best in between the tackles. I think the offensive linemen, I think they also work best kind of keeping things tight there and kind of just trying to get as many holes as possible up the middle. And I understand it can look rough at times when they're getting stuffed up the middle, either for no gain or a slight gain there. But as Coach Cristobal said after the game, he really felt like kind of the second half, Miami just kind of continued to stuck with it, and that's essentially what happened in terms of things starting to break their way in the run game. Look, they had a decent amount of yards there in the first half, over 150, really had more yards than Stanford, even though the score was tied 7-7. But then the second half, they continued their drives. They finished off in the end zone, got in they took advantage of 2 interceptions. Shout out Wesley Bassane and Xavier Lucas for getting interceptions and then putting Miami in great field position. And Miami did a good job. But the offense of just continue to get first downs, get close to the end zone, and then punch it in. And I think that's what happens when you have a power running game the way Miami wants to have with its identity. Eventually you're just going to wear down teams, and that's where I felt like this game was won. And that's what the philosophy of Coach Cristobal and this offensive staff, that's what they want to rely on. Just the offensive line really wearing on their opponents and getting success in the run game, and it showed tonight. They stuck with it again the last couple weeks, and we'll see how things go moving forward. Certainly a really big game next week at SMU. And it was one of these games that was circled when the schedule came out that it was going to be a big game. And look, SMU lost earlier today. Certainly a lesson for Miami, I'm sure, going into this one, to make sure you don't take your opponents lightly or anything like that. Not that SMU did, but Wake Forest was the slight underdog there, and SMU couldn't get the win there. However, even though SMU did not win, it's a huge game because both teams have one conference loss and essentially backs against the wall next week. And we'll see if Miami's game, with what it did today and how they've kind of done all season long, aside from that loss to Louisville, will it translate into a big win at SMU? And this is really a game that should be exciting to everybody in terms of this is a game that both teams in the ACC have a lot at stake. Both teams want to get to Charlotte. SMU was there last year. They've not lost an ACC game before earlier today in the 2 years they've been in the conference. So they want to bounce back, and with these teams with one loss, we'll see how it goes. I'm very excited about it, looking forward to covering that game, leading up to it, provide as much content as possible. But getting back to this game, again, Mark Fletcher and the offensive line did a really good job there. Great to see too. Jordan Lau kind of bust out with a 17-yard touchdown run. Kind of showing his burst and ability there. Maybe they'll get him some outside runs where I think he can be most effective with his running style and his big play ability. So we'll see. Maybe something will be unlocked after what we saw today, because I thought it was a nice touchdown run, kind of getting to the perimeter and then getting in the end zone. Pringle also got a late score to kind of cap it off there in the closing seconds, which was good to see. Miami, 5 touchdown runs, the 199 yards. This is what they want to be with their team. And sticking with the offense, Carson Beck, not a huge yardage total, 189, but goes 21-28. And this is what we're seeing from Carson. No picks today, which was good. The nice touchdown pass to CJ, as I mentioned, and a good catch by CJ, certainly, on that touchdown grab. But with Carson, the really high completion percentage numbers are really adding up for him this season. And I know the interception, he can't go back to the Louisville game, but I thought it was a good bounce back effort here today. And I think he's just kind of gaining more confidence with what is expected out of him in this offense. And, again, they're going to lean on their running game, but they're going to expect Carson to make these efficient throws, be efficient in the passing game, make plays when needed, get the ball downfield, take some deep shots if you have them. CJ Daniels has caught in deep balls, Malachi Toney. And speaking of Malachi, just great watching him navigate all parts of the fields today. Gets very heavily involved in the punt return game, but also catching the ball, the catch and run stuff, and then also, some running stuff, carry. So I think Malachi, as long as he kind of continues to kind of chip away at this freshman season and doesn't hit this freshman wall, or a team doesn't really take away from him, but that didn't happen tonight, certainly. A high impact game from him once again, which is great to see. Again, asked Coach Cristobal about Malachi after the game, and look, they're just all in on Malachi. Everything he brings to the table, on and off the field, he's a lot of fun to watch, and I think you're seeing even more, and Cristobal said it, a game changer, but more game-breaking ability out of him. I think you could see some big plays, even bigger than the ones that he's already done this year. I think he's going to certainly be a key. A lot of guys are, but Malachi, pay attention to him as this ACC just really gets underway for Miami with 5 games still to go in the conference play. And I touched on those top guys, Fletcher, and I touched on, Malachi, obviously, Carson, those top guys on the offense. But, I thought it was good to see Tony Johnson out here. Goes 3 for 69. Joshua Moore also involved, gets 4 catches, 38 yards, So we'll see if those guys can continue to stay in the offense and be factors there. And the reps were there for both of them. They've been kind of down. JoJo got some reps today too. Didn't get a catch, but good to see him get some reps. So we'll see how things kind of continue to evolve with this receiving core. But they've got to get more guys involved and be factors. And I thought that was a good thing today, kind of moving forward, because with this offense, looking back to last year, they had 5 guys catching passes, the 4 wide receivers and then tight end and Elijah there. And this year, it's really just kind of felt like 2 guys that Carson could throw to, CJ Daniels or Malachi Toney. So getting some heavy workloads, some impact plays out of these other guys with Toney and Joshua, who we saw earlier in the year, but kind of went quiet there for a while. Keelan Marion's out there quite a bit. We'll see if he can kind of really stretch the field a little bit more with his speed. He's got to get that yards, per catch up a little bit. He's got to be able to kind of get downfield a little bit more, but we'll see, how this thing kind of continues to transpire. So certainly a lot on the offense, but I don't want to skip over the defense, because they give up that touchdown early, very early in the game there, as Stanford goes down the field, a long drive, and then that was it. The 7 points. Defense deserves a lot of credit. Really disrupted the pass game. Gave up a couple long runs, but nothing too impactful there. It just made things very difficult on the passing attack. And then, as I mentioned earlier, those huge interceptions. Wesley almost scores on his. Xavier Lucas sets up a score. So really good job out of those 2 guys, just making plays, making big plays. And I think that's what this defense needs to continue to do. Make these big plays. Don't rely on just the big plays, but they did a good job. Also, Stanford under 200 yards of total offense. Miami really dominated in that category as well, as you would expect with the score that it was, as Miami goes for over 400. But the defense has to continue to do a good job keeping the yardage total down, and then also obviously the points, but as well as making big plays, and that was good to see. Shout out to Lucas too. Xavier Lucas had a sack as well, a pass breakup in addition to his interception. So a very active game from him, which was good to see, as Miami's defense did a great job. And that's what they want too. Also, I talked about the identity with what they want in the run game on offense, kind of mixing in the pass and still being a threat passing the ball. But defensively, look, they have a defense they believe in and believe can hold teams down. And we'll see how things kind of go moving forward. But they have made quite a bit of strides from last year. We'll see how they do next week again against SMU. A really big game there. Just my final thoughts, and maybe I didn't address this well enough at the beginning, but to me, this is a good win for Miami. Look, It didn't look good at times. That's football sometimes. That's college football. You see all around the country, you see teams drop games or play tight games, but Miami did what it needed to do. It stretched the lead. It got a huge win. I mean, they won by 35. And look, again, maybe the first quarter or even the first half didn't look great, but they pulled away, and that's exactly what you want from this team. And I really thought that was big, too, that after halftime, clearly they didn't get overly discouraged. That's a positive sign moving forward. They could have been, even more disappointed that the score was tied. It's a team they know they're favored by a lot. They know they're expected to win. Last game didn't go well. They got the loss. And sometimes this happens. Teams can get discouraged and it can affect them, and then they just don't play well enough to get the win. That's not what happened at all. And I think, again, they deserve credit. 21-0 in the third quarter, take control of the game, and then kind of ride on from there and move on to the next game. Get the win and move on. So we'll see how this team does against SMU. As I mentioned earlier, really looking forward to discussing that one. Thanks again for tuning in. Drop in the comments below. Let me know what you think of this game. Are you concerned, worried? Are you more optimistic now that, especially that it was 42-7, that they weren't down 7-0 like they were early on? Maybe your opinions change as the game went on. Or there are things that still kind of bother you that you're not quite sure of that will be corrected in time against SMU, a team that can certainly lose to, but certainly, as I mentioned, SMU has a lot on the line too. It should be a lot of fun there in Dallas. We'll see how it goes. Thanks for tuning in. Have a good rest of the weekend. Thanks for your support. Thanks for subscribing, and take care.